Welcome to the Bonhoeffer Show with Bill Hull. The show about stuff most people try to avoid, but can't because it controls their lives. Religion, culture, and politics. Why does Bill Hull host this show? Because he and Bonhoeffer hoisted a few brews together in Berlin. Nope. That never happened. Is it that Bonhoeffer's book, The Cost of Discipleship, both challenged and changed Bill as a young man? Well, yes, that is part of it. But it's primarily because Bonhoeffer called us to a costly discipleship. And there has never been a time when such courage has been more absent or desperately needed than now. Bonhoeffer famously said, "Christianity without discipleship is always Christianity without Christ." The Bonhoeffer Project is committed to turning leaders into disciple makers. Because if leaders fail to create disciple-making movements, then we have failed. So, ladies and gentlemen, here he is. He's still tall and good-looking. And yes, he is wearing German cologne. He's acquired a few more underlying conditions. But direct from his underground bunker in Long Beach, California, the man who once told Don Henley, "You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave," Bill Hull.
Well, welcome to the Bonhoeffer Show, and today we're going to celebrate my birthday. Actually, not directly. This is December and my birthday is in July, but on July the 14th, 1789, 156 years ago, 156 years before I was born, actually, thousands of French citizens stormed the Bastille in Paris. Actually, only about 900 stormed the Bastille. Numbers vary depending on what cable news channel Parisians were watching. Citizens were fed up with Louis XVI. He must have been worse than his 15 predecessors. His wife, Marie of Antoinette, reportedly snorted and said of hungry Parisians, "Let them eat cake." Apparently, she never said it, but let's blame her anyway. It fits the narrative, and that's what counts these days. She was arrested, tried, and beheaded on October the 14th, 1792. Reports vary as to if head and body were buried together. The Bastille Armory, fortress, and political prison symbolized raw power and tyranny of the monarchy. Revolution was necessary, but before the revolution was possible, and this is where we want to go here today, defending the king had to go out of fashion. Revolutionaries would need to employ a strategy that would change public opinion. You can't have revolution without the changing of public opinion. In more modern terms, public sentiment necessary to make the monarchy tenable would need to be crushed. Storming the Bastille is a study of public opinion and mass psychology. It also teaches us about the power of free speech and the squelching of it. Before a mob could storm the Bastille, a spiral of silence would be required. And that's today's theme, a spiral of silence. Now, once the crowd turned into a mob and found its way to the square near the Bastille, it had grown to several thousand by that time. Now, for a large crowd to turn into a mob, individual moral judgments must be deferred to the group, and the group itself becomes a living entity. I see this in riots and looting, a group of people kicking and beating a person on the ground. Normally, rational individuals wouldn't do that, but they defer judgment and even individual moral choices and turn their will over to the self-appointed leaders of the group. Often when questioned later, members of riotous mobs will deny any personal responsibility for the destruction of property, injury, or even the death of others. They have become convinced in a greater good that transcends all normal forms of morality. A very interesting dynamic in all this is the crowd shoved its way toward the Bastille It only was able to move in that direction because they were allowed to move there. The cooperation of the soldiers was necessary for them to move there. The opinion of authorities was to allow the crowd to proceed. They didn't say, stop, you can't go there, shame on you. They said, makes sense. Public opinion. They shot at the Bastille from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. But the walls were 40 feet high and 30 feet thick. They could have shot endlessly for days and no real damage would have been done. But the soldiers in the Bastille were sympathetic to the cause. They were careful not to harm the crowd. The crowds made demands. Thus, the Bastille commander withdrew the cannon from the firing ports. And then he invited a deputation from the mob to have breakfast with him. How nice. That's what you do, right? When they're storming your Bastille. The commander then orders his soldiers not to fire on the crowd, even if attacked. He finally allowed his soldiers to fire on them after alerting the crowd that he had done so. He had already lowered the first bridge into the fortress. I'm sure the show of accommodation was pretty clear. The commander's opinion was shaped by forces other than conventional convictions that previously had protected the monarchy from threat. So the commander and his soldiers no longer believed in those convictions. They no longer believed in the monarchy. So they had changed their minds. Public opinion had changed. In the end, one of the fighters put it well, the Bastille was not taken by force. It surrendered before it ever could be attacked. In the end, a soldier inside the Bastille lowered the bridge and allowed the mob to enter in and begin the destruction. What appeared to be all of Paris outside the fortress to the 120 soldiers inside the fortress was actually less than 1,000 active revolutionaries. There were thousands more gathered, yes, but witnesses reported that most were spectators, well-dressed men and women stopping to watch on their way to doing something else. Like most corrupted leaders or ideologies, they eventually crumble under the weight of their own failure. And that's what happened to Louis XVI. Now, the interesting aspect to this was the behavior of the onlookers who vastly outnumbered the actual people storming the Bastille. They went along with the mob. They knew that in order to avoid isolation, rejection, and criticism, and public opinion, and being shamed, they would need to show approval. And isn't that the way it is? That in society, there are a small minority who are the leaders, the instigators, the protagonists. There are just a few. I mean, the vast majority are people who go along, who don't speak up, who don't stand up, but who just cooperate. Crowd hysteria is a manifestation of public opinion. It's somewhat like an out-of-state vehicle enters into a neighborhood, runs over a child. The enraged residents attack the vehicle, drag the driver from the automobile, and beat him or her into a righteous rage. I think we all understand that dynamic. But during the past months here in the United States, we have seen this dynamic at work. It is not my purpose to take a political side in this article or this statement. We have, however, seen how officials have ordered their police to stand down in the face of peaceful protest that happens to deteriorate sometimes into looting and destruction of property, rioting, and physical abuse. Now, how is this possible? It's possible because public opinion has changed and is being reshaped, and a greater good is at stake. And here how I would take a side. Public opinion is being falsely reshaped by the censorship of big tech and big media and backed by big money. I don't have a problem with all sides being represented by Google, Facebook, and Twitter, but I do have a problem when they suppress free expression and undermine the First Amendment. And then the sad result is a good share of Americans do not have the opportunity to make a truly objective, sourced decision regarding their leaders and representatives. This also has led to a cancel culture. Then out of malice or ignorance, publicly protected, nonpartisan platforms have started to curate the news and shape it to fit their narrative. It has become clear by their employees and leaders' voting and charitable habits that they are quite partisan. there is a larger point to be made here. Freedom of speech is a moral issue and is based on an absolute truth. So we're going to dive into this a little more deeply now. But first, I want you to hear from the man with the golden pipes, Steve Simmons. Tell us about how you can get involved in the Bonhoeffer Project. Thank you, Steve. Take it away.
We turn leaders into disciple makers. That's the mission of the Bonhoeffer Project. But before we can turn you into a disciple-making leader, we need you to be in a cohort. A cohort is a 1-year, 10-meeting, book reading, praying, wrestling, writing, planning challenge that has the potential to change you and thus redirect your life. Interested? Here's the process. Go to our website, thebonhoefferproject.com, and complete the application form. We will contact you. We will then help you select the type of cohort that's best for you. In person, online, or online school, which is asynchronous, so it's not affected by time zones and anyone in the world can access it. Oh, and training is now also available in Spanish. In the meantime, subscribe to the show, read one of Bill's books, and send us a question you want Bill or some member of the Bonhoeffer team to answer. And now, back to the show.
We're back. We turn leaders into disciple makers. Actually, in 2021, I'll be having my own cohort, the Founders Cohort, we call it. And you can sign up for that on our website, thebonhoefferproject.com. Okay, the contemporary argument against the First Amendment. The contemporary argument against the First Amendment. You heard me right. Now, let me read the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. All right, that's the First Amendment. Sometimes we just think of it as about speech, but it's about religion, it's about assembly, it's about being able to petition the government. Now, some simple exegesis interprets the relevant phrase, or abridging the freedom of speech. To abridge something means to limit it, to shorten it, to curtail it. There is a movement among less enlightened or historically ignorant generations that say some speech is so heinous and wrong or misleading it should not be allowed on public platforms or seen by the American people. This is an argument that has been put forward since the earliest time of humankind and has been soundly rejected in the United States again and again, and hopefully forever. The First Amendment speech provision is to protect all speech, especially the kind that is heinous, incorrect, and crazy. Comedians can't be funny unless they can say outrageous things. And even things that aren't true, but are caricatures of what might be true. And we all know the difference innately. But unless all speech is protected, none of it is. And what gets protected is decided by whomever is in power. And this is the danger. We must hear from the alt-right and the loony left. We don't want to, but we are responsible to sort it out ourselves. It is the only way truth can remain center stage. Without it, we are not a free people. This is so important. The press is also free to be as partisan, as crazy as they have become. They are free to lose the confidence of the American people, as they have. The people of the United States are free to turn them off, criticize them, and even replace them. The free market will replace them when citizens ignore them and stop watching, listening, and reading them. That's the way it works. All right. So you can't start it or stop it like that unless you get involved in tyranny. Earlier, I stated that freedom of speech is a moral issue. This centers around the answer to the question, from where or from whom do we claim that free speech is more than a political right? but a right bestowed upon all humans. I really believe this, my friends. The materialistic view is different than that. I propose that the idea that the existence of humans, the heavens, and the earth are all cosmic mysteries, or some mathematical improbable probability, that I think is a lie. A universe without a guide, a mind, a strategy, or purpose is an absurdity. It defies logic, any sense of reason or science. Science requires reason. Science requires logic. Science requires order. You can't do science without those three things. And discovering what's repeatable. And most of all, it needs material motion and life itself in order to be practiced. The mind itself cannot be trusted to work a problem if not designed to comprehend laws of the universe and that are logical. Matter and mind must match up in order for anyone to make sense of what is happening around us. The easiest lie to expose is the one that repulses all of humanity. There is no God. Your life is an accident. You are nothing more than a meat puppet. You live, you die, nothing really matters. As Paul put it so simply, they know the truth about God because he made it obvious to them. He's talking about all of humankind. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God has made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, eternal power, his divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. He's saying everybody knows there's a God. And to pretend there isn't is being simply dishonest. Now, here is the link to the free speech. The materialistic view, which is held by many in the ruling class, believes we are simply consumers. Now, if you're simply a consumer and not a moral being created by God, they can censor and edit out reality from the consumer class because their conformity to the greater wisdom of the ruling class is a higher value than the freedom of speech, because not everybody deserves the same freedoms, because not everybody is as important as another person. The government makes the decision as to what is true and false, what is right and wrong, and they can have the power to confer limited freedoms on the population in concert with what the ruling class thinks is best for the underclass. This is how the majority of nations have conducted themselves for most of history. This is not so in the United States, and let me tell you why. The spiritual view. This is the most simple and clear point because it's profound. Even our founding fathers, some Congregationalists, some Baptists, some Methodists, and yes, agnostics and deists, agreed on this. That we are made in God's image, and our rights come from the divine, not from man or government. That's fundamental to who we are as a people. That's the idea behind this nation, is that these are God-given rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the First Amendment to this Constitution, as seen above, was the right to free speech given to every human by God. But this goes even deeper. God made man in his own image. This means in man's immaterial nature, the personality traits such as mind, spirit, will, conscience, and soul, we are so valuable to God that he became a man in a person of Jesus the Christ and died for our eternal souls. Jesus' visit to earth was the most powerful word or statement that could possibly be made as to the value of persons. He gave himself as a sacrifice that ensured our freedom and our dignity. That also meant that every thought and word that a human being has is valuable to God, and every person has a right to be heard. We are told that one day every word we speak will be remembered by God and will be held accountable for those words. Matthew 12:36. The fight for freedom of speech is one worth having. Don't give into the spiral of silence. It has already begun. Please step up. Don't shut up. I leave with the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Pray for the courage to speak up the next time you're told to shut up, to pipe down, to not create a ruckus. What you say matters. Don't go with the mob. Don't fold in the face of the ruling class or as a citizen of the secular city. You are a citizen of the kingdom of God. Jesus is listening to you, recording what you say, and unlike Siri, will be there to reward you on Judgment Day. Well, as we like to say, follow Jesus, and he'll teach you everything you'll ever need to know.
Well, we hope that the show wasn't too bad. Jane Hull wants everyone to know that if anything Bill said was offensive, she feels your pain. If you were upset by anything Bill and his guests said, well, mission accomplished. At the Bonhoeffer Show, we value irreverent, satirical, and generally inappropriate behavior. But when it comes to fulfilling the Great Commission, we don't mess around. Remember, subscribe. We promise. No private jets, no white suits, and definitely no toupees.